The marketplace of Vornak City was not a place for the faint of heart. It stretched for kilometers, a chaotic sprawl of colors, noises, and smells that could overwhelm even the most seasoned spacer. Shouts from merchants in half a dozen languages battled with the clanging of metal, the whirring of droid servants, and the low hum of hovering cargo skiffs. The air was thick with the smell of ozone from faulty generators, mingled with the sharp tang of alien spices and the more unpleasant stench of bodies, too many crammed into too small a space. Commander Elias Marr, fresh from his discharge from the Terran Navy, walked through it with deliberate steps. He had seen worse battlefields, plague camps, derelict ships, but the Vornak market had its own brand of cruelty. Here, sentience meant nothing unless it came with credits or influence. Those who had neither were bought and sold like trinkets. He was not here by chance. Elias had heard rumors, whispered in the grimy corners of spacer bars, that an off-world beast had been captured and brought to market. Some said it was a dangerous predator from the frontier worlds. Others claimed it was a failed experiment. The truth, he suspected, was something different, and he intended to see for himself. He passed the stalls of fruit vendors and weapon dealers, heading toward the darker side of the market, the pens. Rows of containment cells lined the alley, some with heavy steel bars, others with flickering energy fields. Inside were creatures from dozens of worlds, some docile, some snarling, all equally trapped. In the eyes of the vendors, they were stock commodities to be priced and traded. Then he saw her. She was in the last cell, crouched in the shadows, her fur matted and tangled from neglect. At first glance, she could have been mistaken for an oddman. Animal lean frame, digitigrade legs, hands tipped with claws, sharp ears twitching at every sound. But then she looked up, and Elias saw her eyes golden, luminous, intelligent. The way she held his gaze was not the look of a broken creature. It was a challenge, an unspoken question. What are you going to do about it? The vendor noticed his attention and swaggered over. He was a bulky reptilian alien with mottled green skin and a grin full of sharp teeth. She's a wild one, he said as if proud of the fact. Bit 3 handlers. Killed another. Only reason she's still breathing is she's worth more alive. Elias didn't look away from her. What is she? Lyran, the vendor spat, as though the words was dirty. Borderworld species, half feral. No use except for sport or security work. You put her on a chain, she guard whatever you tell her to. Put her in a pit, she win you money. The words made Elias's jaw tighten. He'd encountered Lyrans once before during a diplomatic escort mission. They were hunters, yes, but also philosophers, poets, and starship navigators. Calling one an animal was like calling a Terran wolf incapable of loyalty or thought. She's dangerous. The vendor continued, mistaking Elias's silence for hesitation. She'd tear your throat out if you let her. Elias crouched so he was eye level with the cell's occupant. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink back. Instead, her ears tilted forward, her gaze steady and unafraid. Up close, he could see the marks of mistreatment bruises under her fur, the raw lines where shackles had bitten into her wrists. I'll take her, he said. The vendor blinked. Take her? You mean buy her? You got credits? I've got enough. The alien laughed, naming a price that would have made a lesser man walk away. Elias didn't haggle. He transferred the credits without another word. A moment later, the cell door swung open with a squeal of rusted hinges. 2 guards shoved her forward. She stumbled, but instead of falling to her knees, she caught herself and stood tall, even with her wrists still bound. Elias shrugged off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders. It was far too big for her, but it covered the iron cuffs and gave her at least a fragment of dignity. You're not property anymore, he murmured, his voice just for her. "You're coming with me." She didn't speak, but something flickered in her golden eyes, something he chose to believe was hope. She followed him out of the market without resistance, her bare feet silent against the wet stone. The first night on Elias Mars' freighter was quiet. Unnervingly so. Keen still didn't know her name, yet sat cross-legged on the floor near the wall, her back to the corner, eyes tracking his every movement. She didn't blink. Often, and when she did, it was slow, deliberate, like a predator conserving energy. Elias didn't try to force conversation. The journey back from the Vornak market had been wordless. The only sounds the hum of the freighter's engines and fans, the faint patter of her bare feet following him up the gangway. Now, in the narrow, dim-lit living space, she seemed more shadow than flesh, still wrapped in his oversized jacket. He set a pot on the small galley stove, letting the scent of the meal fill the air. The stew wasn't fancy protein cubes, root, vegetables, and a handful of herbs from his emergency ration stores, but it was warm and nourishing. He made 2 bowls without hesitation, placing them on the table side by side. When he slid one toward her, she didn't move. Instead, she studied the bowl as if it might be a trap. "Food," he said simply. Her ears twitched, but she remained still. Elias didn't press. He sat down across from her and started eating his own portion, deliberately keeping his eyes down, showing her that the food was safe. After a few minutes, he heard the soft scrape of the chair across the metal floor. She approached, slow, measured, and sat opposite him. She didn't use the spoon at first. She leaned forward slightly, sniffed the contents, then scooped some into her mouth with her clawed hand. Only after the first bite did she begin to eat in earnest, still watching him between mouthfuls. "My name's Elias," he said after a while, keeping his tone casual. No answer. He tried again. "You have a name?" Still nothing. Her gaze was steady, unreadable. For the next few days, their pattern remained the same. Elias spoke occasionally, never demanding a reply. He made sure there was food, clean water, and access to the fresher. She explored the ship at night, the faint sound of her claws on the decking the only clue. She was moving about. He made a point of leaving tools and supplies where she could see them. If she wanted to sabotage something or arm herself, she could, but she didn't. He took that as a small sign. On the 4th night, while Elias was repairing a faulty conduit in the maintenance bay, he heard a voice behind him, soft, low, and cautious. "Kalen." He looked up from his work. "What?" "My name," she clarified. "Kalen." Elias straightened, meeting her eyes. "Kalen," he repeated, letting the syllables settle in the air. "That's a good name." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze narrowing. "Why? Why what? Why take me?" The question was not accusatory, but there was weight behind it. Elias put down the hydrospanner he'd been holding. "Because no one deserves to be treated like you were. And because," he paused, searching for the truth he wanted her to hear. "Because when you looked at me back there, I saw someone who still knew they were more than what those bastards said. I couldn't just walk away." Kalen didn't respond right away. She studied him for a long moment, her golden eyes searching his face for lies. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement, and turned to leave. That night, when Elias returned to the living space, she wasn't in the corner anymore. Instead, she was curled on the couch, still wrapped in his jacket. It was a small thing, but in the delicate balance of trust, it was monumental. Over the next days, their interaction shifted in tiny increments. She began to ask short questions about the ship, the controls, the stars outside the viewport. Elias answered each one plainly, never mocking her for what she didn't know, never over-explaining as if she were a child. She also began to help in small ways, passing him tools while he worked, securing loose cargo straps before takeoff. She still avoided unnecessary touch, but she no longer flinched when he passed too close in the narrow corridors. One evening, as the freighter coasted in silent drift through a calm stretch of space, Elias glanced at her and noticed the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. It wasn't quite a smile, more like the memory of one, but it was enough to tell him they were moving in the right direction. Elias was in the cockpit, running a standard long-range scan, when a faint encrypted ping appeared on the display. At first, it looked like random noise, a miscalibrated sensor. But when he cleaned up the signal, the message became clear: a bounty. Notice. His eyes narrowed as the details scrolled across the screen. The target's profile picture was unmistakable: golden eyes, sharp ears, fur streaked with silver. Kalen. The bounty was too high for a simple retrieval job. Whoever issued it didn't just want her back. They wanted her brought in alive, no matter the cost, and they were willing to pay enough to draw every mercenary and pirate within 3 sectors. Elias shut off the screen just as Kalen entered the cockpit. She glanced at him, instantly sensing his shift in mood. "What is it?" "Nothing you need to worry about," he said, maybe too quickly. Her eyes narrowed. "You're a bad liar." He hesitated. Hiding the truth wouldn't keep her safe, not from hunters who might already be on their trail. "There's a bounty," he admitted. "On you." Kellen's jaw tightened, but she didn't look surprised. "I told you, they will come. And they will kill you to get me." Elias leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Let them try." She tilted her head, studying him. "You fight well?" "Well enough to get into trouble," he said with a faint smile. Her ears twitched in amusement, but her gaze stayed serious. "These will not be amateurs. Trackers don't stop. They hunt until they have what they came for." 2 days later, trouble arrived. They were passing through the outer reaches of the Varan Belta, stretch of space littered with jagged asteroids, when the sensors lit up with a contact moving fast. The ship was small, built for speed, and its approach vector left no doubt. "Boarding skiff," Elias muttered, checking the weapon systems. The skiff latched onto them with magnetic clamps before they could break away. A sharp metallic clang reverberated through the hull, followed by the hiss of a cutting torch at the airlock. Elias grabbed his blaster. "Stay behind me." Kalen didn't answer. Instead, she crouched low, her claws sliding out with a faint metallic scrape. Her golden eyes burned with an intensity he hadn't seen before. The first mercenary through the breach never made it. 2 steps. Kalen moved faster than Elias could track. One moment she was crouched, the next she was on him, a blur of fur and muscle. Her claws raked across his weapon arm, sending his blaster clattering to the deck. Elias took down the second attacker with a precise shot to the shoulder, dropping him without killing him. The third tried to flank them, but Kalen intercepted, slamming him into the bulkhead with enough force to make the metal ring. When it was over, 3 mercenaries lay on the deck alive but groaning in pain. Kalen stood over them, breathing steadily, her claws still wet with the evidence of her speed. Elias lowered his weapon slowly, staring at her in something between awe and respect. "You were holding back before," he said. Kalen smirked faintly. "Didn't want to scare you." They moved the unconscious mercenaries into the cargo hold, locking them inside before ejecting the boarding skiff into open space. As the freighter pulled away from the asteroid field, Elias sat in the cockpit, glancing over at her. "You've done this before," he said. "Survival," she replied simply, settling into the co-pilot seat. "They took me once because I trusted the wrong people. That will never happen again." Elias looked at her for a long moment. "Then we make sure it doesn't." She didn't answer, but her gaze held his for several seconds before she turned back to the starfield. From that day on, they trained together in the cargo bay. Kalen showed him close-quarters techniques, how to use his weight against an opponent, how to move silently, how to read a hunter's body language. In return, Elias taught her how to handle a blaster, how to aim with precision rather than rage. It wasn't just training. It was preparation. Before, Kalen had been cautious present, but always holding back as if ready to vanish at a moment's notice. Now something in her stance had shifted. She walked the ship with a quiet confidence, no longer avoiding his presence. When they worked together in the cargo bay or navigation room, she moved in sync with him, anticipating his needs without a word, and she talked more. At first, it was practical questions. What does this control do? Or where are we going next? But soon her curiosity wandered beyond the ship. She asked about Earth, its oceans, its forests, its countless cities. Elias told her about Terran rainstorms that could drench you in seconds, about food so spicy it made your eyes water, and about music, something she seemed fascinated by. In return, she told him about Lyran traditions. Her voice would grow softer, her golden eyes distant as she described her homeworld's twin moons and the great silver plains where her people hunted. She spoke of song circles where each heartbeat in the group set the rhythm, of hunts that were as much about honoring the prey as they were about survival. One night, after a long day of engine repairs, Elias was sitting in the cockpit, letting the hum of the ship fill the silence. Kalen entered quietly, her footsteps almost soundless on the decking. "I've been thinking," she said, standing near the viewport, staring at the starfield. "That sounds dangerous," he teased lightly, earning a sideways glance from her. She didn't smile, but her ears twitched, something he had come to recognize as her version of amusement. "On Lyran worlds," she began, "when one saves another's life, it is not casual. It is a bond." Elias turned in his seat to face her fully. "A bond?" "A vow," she clarified. "We call it the oath of the chosen. When someone becomes chosen, you fight beside them, protect them, share food, share shelter. It is for life." The way she said it carried weight, like the words themselves were heavy with history. Elias understood enough about her culture now to know this wasn't a simple tradition. It was closer to marriage than to friendship, but even that wasn't a perfect comparison. "And you've made this vow before?" he asked carefully. Her gaze locked on his. "No." Something about the way she said it made the air between them feel charged. Elias leaned forward slightly. "And why are you telling me this?" She took a slow step closer. "Because I want to make it now." He froze, not out of fear, but out of the sheer gravity in her voice. "Kalen, you don't owe me anything. I didn't free you expecting." Her expression sharpened. "It is not debt, it is choice." That silenced him. She came closer still until she stood directly before him. She raised her hand, clawed, but steady, and placed it gently against his chest, over his heart. Her eyes never left his. "You saw me when no one else did. You gave me back my name. To them, I was an animal. To you, I am Kalen." Elias swallowed, his voice low. "And to me, you're everything." There was no kiss, no sudden embrace. That wasn't their way. Instead, Kalen pressed her forehead against his for a moment, the gesture intimate in its simplicity. Then she stepped back, the bond unspoken yet sealed all the same. From that moment forward, their partnership felt different. Not just allies, not just friends. Something stronger, older, and more enduring. Elias found himself glancing over his shoulder during maintenance work, knowing without looking that Kalen was there, watching his back. She began teaching him some Lyran phrases, words for trust, for strength, for home. He taught her Terran ones in return, laughing when her accent twisted them into something uniquely hers. They sparred in the cargo bay, her speed forcing him to adapt. his strategy forcing her to think in new ways. After one session, she remarked, "You fight like a predator without claws." And he took it as a compliment. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about belonging. And though neither of them said it out loud, Elias knew they had crossed a line. They weren't just traveling together, they were bound. Elias had just finished recalibrating the freighter's navigation array when the proximity alarm screamed to life. He was in the cockpit within seconds, eyes scanning the sensor readout. 3 ships small, fast, and built for boarding. They weren't mercenaries this time. The Lyran transponder codes told him exactly who they were, a hunting pack. Kaylin appeared in the doorway, her golden eyes narrowing as she took in the display. "Trackers," she said, her voice tight. "They work for the ones who sold me." "They won't stop." Elias turned to her. "Then we make them stop." There was no fear in her face, only a cold, controlled focus. "They will not take me alive. Not again." The freighter shuddered as the lead ship fired a volley across their bow warning shots. Seconds later, grappling hooks bit into the hull with metallic shrieks. The trackers weren't trying to destroy the freighter. They wanted it intact, so they could drag her back in chains. Elias grabbed his sidearm. Kaylin didn't need a weapon, she was one. The first tracker through the breach. Barely had time to register the human aiming a blaster before Elias dropped him with a precise stun shot. The second and third came in fast, but Kaylin was faster. She moved in a blur, claws raking across one attacker's weapon arm, fangs bared in a snarl that made the other hesitate just long enough for Elias to put him down. They fought their way toward the cargo bay, where the largest breach had been made. Here, the air was thick with the smell of ozone from discharged weapons. The remaining trackers were waiting, forming a half circle, weapons leveled. The leader, a tall Lyran male with dark gray fur and cold silver eyes, stepped forward. His voice was sharp, almost ceremonial. "You are Kaylin of the Plains. You were taken from your people. You will return." Kellen's voice was a low growl. "I will not." "This is not your choice," the leader snapped. "You are bound. By blood, you belong to us." Delia stepped in front of her without thinking. "She belongs to no one." The leader's eyes flicked over him in disdain. "You think she will choose you? She is an animal. You are prey." Elias tightened his grip on his blaster. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you." The standoff broke in an instant. The trackers surged forward, and the cargo bay exploded into chaos. Blaster fire lit the air in short bursts. Kaylin darted between the attackers, her movements precise and lethal. Elias covered her from range, taking down anyone who tried to flank her. At one point, he saw the leader charging toward her from behind. "Kaylin left," he shouted. She pivoted mid-strike, her claws finding the leader's chest in a fluid, devastating motion. The force of it sent him crashing to the floor. Pinned beneath her, the leader bared his teeth. "You will regret this," he hissed. Kaylin leaned close, her voice a whisper only he could hear. Tell them I am not theirs. Tell them I am chosen." She released him, letting him live not out of mercy, but so he could carry her words back to those who had sent him. The surviving trackers dragged their wounded leader away, retreating through the breach. A moment later, the grappling hooks detached, and the enemy ships broke off. Silence fell. Elias leaned against the bulkhead, breathing hard. Blood trickled down his arm from a graze, but he was still standing. Kaylin crossed the bay in a few quick steps and knelt beside him, pressing her palm to the wound. "You'll live," she said, her tone calm, almost matter-of-fact. He chuckled weakly. "Good. I'd hate to break my promise." Her ears tilted forward. "What promise?" "That I'd never let them take you again." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the hum of the ship the only sound. Then Kaylin rested her forehead against his, just as she had when she had given him her vow to the galaxy. She would always be the beast they had tried to break. But to Elias, she was Kaelin, the warrior, the chosen, the one who had changed his life the moment. He looked into her golden eyes, and to her, Elias was not just the man who had freed her. He was the one she had chosen. Everything.